This video is sponsored by Raycon. Alright, once again we are back with another edition of our Klub Outside Q&A Roundup series. Now as always, Kubo takes and answers a variety of questions directly from fans over on his personal Q&A platform, and then we try to dissect those answers right here on the channel to see if there's anything of value to be found. And now a lot of the time, Kubo's comments are a mix of light-hearted chatter and fluff, but sometimes we are given real, genuine insight into the story and world of Bleach that for whatever reason simply wasn't found in the original material. And as always, I'm not looking at every single answer he's ever given, nor even necessarily looking at them in any kind of chronological order. Mostly I'm trying to curate the answers that I find to be interesting and to have the most value. And so, speaking of which, this time the questions revolve around the topics of the meaning behind Aizen's Hōgyoku evolutions, the strength of Wonderweiss's Hiero, special elemental Kidō, and more. Now, as always, I want to give a huge thank you to M Shadows for providing the translations to the questions and answers pretty much each and every week without fail, I think, and there is a link in the description to where you too can find them, so make sure to check them out and support the work they are doing. Right, on with the latest roundup. We'll begin with the topic of Aizen's Hōgyoku evolutions, as I think this is a cool answer and something to be explored further. Before we do get started on the video today, however, guys, consider hitting subscribe down below if you enjoyed the video and you want to see more like this from the channel. You want to help support the channel, it does go a very long way, and the same can be said as well for my other channel, Mr. Tomo Talks Games. I do want to hit 15,000 subs over there by the end of the year, and it's only really possible with your help. So again, if you want to help support the channel, that would make a massive difference, and it really would be greatly appreciated. And now, before we get started with the topics, first a quick word from today's sponsor. Look, editing videos all day, every day can get pretty tiresome and kinda boring without something to listen to for hours on end that isn't just my own voice, and thanks to my Raycon earbuds I can maintain my sanity even deep into working on a new Bleach discussion. My biggest pet peeve with earphones was that they'd always fall out of my ears, especially when walking, so Raycon's essential open earbuds caught my eye with their open ear design and multi-angular hook which just loops over your ear. Now, this was new to me, but it works incredibly well. Not only do they not fall off, but by sitting outside your ear canal, as opposed to in them, you can stay alert around oncoming traffic, or even just remain a part of whatever's happening around you, all without compromising on audio quality. The earbuds themselves have a fantastic 8 hours of battery life, while the case holds a 36-hour charge, meaning they are perfect not just for while I'm working, but also when I head out during the day. So it's Raycon's anniversary, and to celebrate they are offering a huge 30% off the essential open earbuds. Click the link in the description box or pinned comment below, or simply go to buyraycon.com/MrTomoOpen to receive the discount and support the channel at the same time. Thanks again to Raycon for sponsoring today's video. Alright, we've talked a lot about Aizen's Hōgyoku forms recently, whether that's as part of our latest Bleach battle analysis video, wherein we discussed Aizen's showdown with Kisuke, Yoruichi, and Isshin, or as a part of our latest What If video, where we revisited the idea of Aizen taking on the Zero Division in the aftermath of the Deicide arc. And, well, it looks like we're not done just yet, as Kubo himself had something to say regarding the imagery behind each of Aizen's transformations as he falls further and further into the Hōgyoku's embrace. So let's just dive into this right from the off, as a reader posed the following question to Kubo, which reads, "Please tell us about the motifs of each one of Aizen's Hōgyoku fused forms, if any." Now immediately you might be thinking, well, isn't this a bit of a pointless question? After all, the imagery behind Aizen's Hōgyoku transformations is fairly obvious from the get-go, it's pretty on the nose. As the Hōgyoku begins to break down and replace his soul, Aizen undergoes a literal metamorphosis, and that's represented by a cocoon forming around his body. As a result, the initial white-clad form of Aizen's is quite clearly a chrysalis. Hell, the subtitle of Deicide 8 even refers to the end of the chrysalis age. This is only reinforced, of course, by how durable the chrysalis itself is during battle, but also the fact that once cracked open by enough force, Isshin and the others discover that there's nothing underneath it, save for churning, swirling energy. Aizen's physical body is quite literally being remade before their eyes. Anyway, let's just take a look at what Kubo had to say in response, as I think his answer is actually quite interesting, and goes to a place I didn't expect, as he says, "The all-white form represents the chrysalis form of the butterfly, then the hatching, while his final form symbolizes a butterfly corpse." Now, I like this a lot. While the majority of this imagery is as we knew already, with Aizen entering a chrysalis state and later evolving into a butterfly-like angelic being, there's a bit more meat to the idea than first thought. So the chrysalis form, that's obvious, but next Kubo explicitly calls out the hatching. And the idea of Aizen being in the hatching process actually makes me kind of do a double take and look at this next form of his slightly differently. Having broken out of the chrysalis at least partially, Aizen now sports extremely long hair and newly purple eyes, but otherwise looks mostly the same, and crucially, above all else, is still wearing his chrysalis outfit from the neck down. The idea that Aizen is still in the process of hatching is very interesting to me, and honestly not really something I'd considered. Of course, the butterfly form, Butterflyzen as he's affectionately known, is in truth the ultimate form of his evolution, and likely the stage he was wanting to reach all along. Which is interesting in and of itself, as I always looked at it as a slightly abortive transformation, one that was forced upon him as a result of Gin destroying his body. Though we always knew that Aizen needed to feel the fear of being snuffed out to evolve to a state that transcends Shinigami and Hollow, I think this is really cool and makes total sense that his post-chrysalis yet pre-butterfly form was a kind of halfway house. He was still in the process of hatching from his cocoon, which in real life for real butterflies can apparently take up to an hour even after the final crack has appeared in their cocoon. So I wonder, if left alone for long enough, would Aizen have become Butterflyzen in the end anyway, or was that transformation only possible thanks to Gin's intervention? Basically, did Gin ultimately just hasten what was already an inevitability? Earlier, when I said that Butterflyzen always felt like an abortive transformation due to his body being destroyed by Gin's bankai, well, it kind of seems like that particular imagery is meant to be taken very literally. Gin has broken open the remainder of Aizen's cocoon, perhaps early, and his true self has emerged. But then, Kubo's next note is fascinating as well. Aizen's monster transformation, the final form he attains during his battle against Ichigo, has always felt by far the most mysterious to me, as it is the most out-there form of Aizen's by a considerable margin, forcing him through a grotesque and incredibly painful transformation after Ichigo continues to get the upper hand over him. In this form, Aizen's face is ripped open, revealing a jet black skull beneath, while his body takes on a more physical appearance. He loses the gown, and essentially it's just his naked body, albeit way more muscular, and I guess almost animalistic in a sense, with 3 hollow holes now lining his torso, while the Hōgyoku floats ominously in the center of one of them. Meanwhile, his wings have become, for lack of a better word, eldritch and horrifying, his previous eyes now firmly affixed within the center of the folds. And to me, this form was always indicative of the Hōgyoku fully taking over. Although Aizen liked to think he had some semblance of control remaining, at this point the Hōgyoku has firmly taken the wheel, and forced an unexpected transformation upon its master to try and help him regain control of the fight, after it appears to be spiraling out of control. And that does seem to be exactly what Kubo is going for here. He says this final form is supposed to represent a butterfly corpse, which is awesome, although I have to admit, I'm no expert in butterfly corpses, but is this really what they look like even slightly? I have no idea. Probably not. I suspect the imagery is meant to be less literal and is instead more so supposed to represent the degradation of Aizen's human form, his Shinigami self, into what has essentially become a terrifying monster. And so I think what's more important here is the thought behind the motif. If this is a butterfly corpse, then it does reinforce the narrative that yes, this is Aizen's evolution having gone too far. It's too far gone. It is beyond where even Aizen himself wanted or even expected it to go. And the Hōgyoku is just pushing and pushing, indicative of Aizen losing more and more of not only his control, but of his former self. I mean, he's now essentially unrecognizable, as again is reinforced by the fact that his face, Aizen's recognizable face, has been torn in two, and now dangles gruesomely on either side of this new, very alien appearance. And so if the previous form was meant to be Aizen having reached his apex, this new monstrous being is something else entirely, something unplanned. The evolution is dead. We've gone way beyond where we were supposed to end up, but it's being puppeteered all the same by this alien force. Honestly, it's really cool, and this just makes me wish Aizen actually got the chance to explore and use these particular transformations a bit more, rather than them being hastily kind of rushed through at the end of the arc. But yeah, ultimately, I really like Kubo's answer. And sure, we knew the general idea behind the motifs of these forms, that of evolution, that of change, of a butterfly's chrysalis, but the hatching aspect is really cool, and the idea of the final form being a corpse is awesome as well, and fits perfectly as an indicator of where Aizen's journey has ultimately taken him. Alright, but our next topic is one that I've seen generating a lot of discussion online, and these are always the fun ones. So let's simply begin by looking at the question and answer as they are presented, and then go from there. So a reader posed Kubo the following question, asking, Wonderweiss got shattered by Yamaji's Sōkotsu, but would a strong Aranka, like the Espada, also get shattered? Would someone built with the intent of ultimately self-destructing be more fragile? To which Kubo replied, although not on the level of an Espada's, Wonderweiss possesses a strong Hiero. Sōkotsu is simply super strong, Ikotsu too. This is a good one, I always love these. In a way, and I don't know if the reader meant it to come off like this, but this does feel like a very loaded question to me. The reader is basically insinuating that Wonderweiss was really weak, and that because he was only built for the purposes of containing Ryujin Jaka and then later self-destructing with that power, he was essentially built to break. And this has a knock-on effect on how people see Yamamoto and what he achieved in this fight. Because of course, originally people thought that Yamamoto outright killing Wonderweiss with his bare fists was incredible, especially as Wonderweiss had been confirmed to have Espada level Reiatsu before in the series, ergo Yamamoto must clearly be capable of straight up murdering the Espada with his Sōkotsu attack, and that now, not only is that maybe not the case, but Yamamoto's achievement isn't really all that after all if Wonderweiss was so weak. Especially with Kubo's answer to muddying the waters a little bit, but again, there's a lot to get into here, so I'll try and break it down piece by piece to just give my thoughts on the matter. First of all, and again I don't imagine the reader meant it quite like this, maybe they did, but they note, would a strong Aranka like the Espada also get shattered? Obviously implying that Wonderweiss wasn't a strong Aranka, which is clearly pretty ludicrous. There are numerous metrics or examples within the manga by which to gauge this. One is the R&D department outright classifying Wonderweiss as an Espada level Aranka. Now, that's meaningless in a sense, in the same way that captain level is meaningless these days as a barometer, because all it really means is Wonderweiss at least has the Reiatsu of Yami while unreleased, which I'd argue is still impressive, and it may even be higher, we don't know. And not only that, but Wonderweiss has been shown to be unusual on multiple occasions, managing to almost catch Kisuke off guard and then successfully catching Ukitake off guard, impaling him with such force as to take the captain out of the fight completely is pretty impressive. But then there's the fight with Yamamoto himself, who should always be considered to simply be on a totally different level from every other member of the Gotei 13. Wonderweiss takes the full brunt of Yamamoto's Ikotsu and survives it. Not only that, but while greatly injured and in the process of regenerating, Wonderweiss manages to intercept Yamamoto's next punch, which was aimed at Aizen's face, and even counters it slightly, lightly injuring the head captain as we can see from his wrist as he attempts to kind of fling Wonderweiss aside. And again, this is Yamamoto. It's not an overstatement to acknowledge that Yamamoto's Hakuda mastery and physical strength is practically second to none among the regular Shinigami, especially back in the Urankar arc. Personally, and this is only my opinion, as much of this is, but I never took the ease at which Yamamoto crushed Wonderweiss to be an indictment against Wonderweiss's strength. It was more an example of how far above literally everyone else Yamamoto was. Anyway, moving on, the reader also says the following as part of their question: would someone built with the intent of ultimately self-destructing be more fragile? And actually, I think this is kind of interesting. Because yes, that is Wonderweiss's ultimate purpose, or more accurately, Aizen's ultimate goal for Wonderweiss. Wonderweiss is meant to seal Ryujin Jaka's flames, but then also to explode and release them all when he is killed. And so, once he has sealed the flames, him being killed is the next course of action, as far as Aizen's concerned. And it's true that he does seem to shatter, almost like glass or ceramic, like a vase or something like that, when he's obliterated by Sōkotsu, which is kind of weird, especially when it's pretty clear he is a normal in quotes, being with flesh and blood, as showcased even earlier in that same fight. So I don't know if it's a result of the Sōkotsu specifically that causes Wonderweiss's body to crack and break apart like glass, but I seriously doubt it. It does seem to be a result of Wonderweiss needing to explode and unleash Ryujin Jaka's stored flames. So that does beg the question, would Aizen have modified him to be easier to destroy? Because that would seem to make sense, or at least easy for someone like Yamamoto to destroy, as again, he is on a different level to everyone else. And again, it's likely to only be in his resurrection, right? Because like Mashiro and Kensei can beat up Wonderweiss all they want while he's in base, but he is never going to straight up shatter like this. Honestly, I think that's an interesting idea that should be considered. And in fact, when Yamamoto hits Wonderweiss with Ikotsu earlier, you can see that Wonderweiss's entire body is covered head to toe in cracks. Like that one punch almost did it, but not quite, allowing Wonderweiss to regenerate. Now, Kubo's answer here is interesting, and I think people are maybe interpreting it wrong in some sense, but again, maybe I'm just giving the characters the benefit of the doubt. I don't know any better than anyone else. Kubo notes that, although not on the level of an Espada's, Wonderweiss possesses a strong Hiero. And this confirms outright that Wonderweiss has weaker Hiero than every Espada, presumably, as though the Espada have a kind of baseline level of Hiero that Wonderweiss doesn't meet, which again is not something we ever really knew. But Kubo is quick to emphasize that despite this, Wonderweiss still has a strong Hiero. He's in Wonderweiss's corner. It may not quite be Espada level, again, whatever that really means, but it's good in its own way. It feels to me like, if anything, Kubo is trying to stand up for Wonderweiss with his answer, as again, the question probably wasn't meant like this, but it feels kind of loaded, especially against Wonderweiss. Kubo's kind of like, sure, it's not on the level of an Espada's Hiero, but don't get me wrong, it's damn strong. And then he even notes, as if to reinforce this further, that Sōkotsu is just that powerful, Ikotsu too, reinforcing what I said earlier, that Yamamoto himself is just that powerful. That's the caliber Wonderweiss was up against. What did you expect? And this all kind of comes back around to how Kubo has always presented Yamamoto. Kyoraku himself even addresses this in the Thousand Year Blood War arc when Yamamoto incinerates the three Sternritter. He basically tells Robert, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he tells Robert that when it comes to Yamamoto, logic doesn't apply. You know, all conventions fly out of the window because that's just how powerful he is. It can't be emphasized enough. It is almost like Kubo is saying, don't be too hard on Wonderweiss for dying like this, because that's just how strong Sōkotsu is. Now, in typical Kubo fashion, he didn't admit whether or not Sōkotsu would outright destroy any of the Espada. And knowing now that the level of Wonderweiss's Hiero was lower than the Espada's, I don't think we can make any judgments in that area. It's interesting that Kubo starts his answer with that as if to qualify what he's about to say, but then he kind of just goes ahead and says that, well, Sōkotsu is just that powerful anyway, implying that it doesn't matter the level of Hiero, Arrancar wouldn't be able to stand up to it. I actually kind of think that that is what Kubo is going for here. Again, just my own speculation, just conjecture, but it kind of feels like to me that he is qualifying that, yeah, Wonderweiss's Hiero isn't on the level of an Espada's, but ultimately it doesn't matter in the face of Sōkotsu. And also, just because Wonderweiss's Hiero was lower than the rest of the Espadas apparently, meaning his Hiero threshold doesn't reach whoever among the Espada has the worst Hiero, we don't know. But it doesn't mean that his other attributes don't reach Espada level. He was still very capable of going toe-to-toe with characters like Mashiro. You know, once her mask broke, Wonderweiss pretty much takes her out with a single punch to the face. And speaking of which, he takes Ukitake down, of all characters, with a single surprise attack from behind. And also don't forget as well that Hiero is simply an Arrancar's ability to harden their skin, making it almost akin to steel, and to use that to deflect sword strikes with their bare bodies. But if we take him at face value, you know, someone like Neutra apparently has the strongest Hiero of all the Espada, yet he is ranked 5th, which means it doesn't necessarily correlate to how much Reryoku they have at all. Also, maybe it makes sense that Wonderweiss would have terrible Hiero, because it's all about control. You know, an Arrancar has to actively be able to harden their skin, and with the way Wonderweiss is, it kind of seems to me like that isn't necessarily something he would be able to manage. You know, he seems to fight very much purely based on instinct, which again makes sense. Everything was carved away from him, mentally as well, which is why he mostly just attacks characters from behind, because he's kind of jumping at them in the same way he was chasing after the dragonfly in an almost childlike manner. It makes sense to me, I guess, is what I'm getting at, that Wonderweiss's stats would be all messed up, since he really is built for just a single purpose. He's simply not an ordinary Arrancar, and we can't really gauge him as such, even against the Espada. This is a difficult one, I won't lie, which is why I think it's fun, but ultimately it doesn't really change how I feel about either character. As I said, it feels to me like Kubo is trying to stand up for Wonderweiss here, because the person asking the question clearly thinks that Wonderweiss is really weak for being destroyed by Sōkotsu in this way. And it feels to me like Kubo is trying to readjust that perception while keeping expectations in check. You know, he's kind of being like, well, yes, Wonderweiss's Hiero wasn't as good as the Espada, but also he is a strong Arrancar, you know, don't mistake it. And this is Yamamoto we're talking about at the end of the day here. And so again, in that sense, it does almost feel like Kubo is saying, good Hiero or not, Espada level Hiero or not, it doesn't matter. Sure, Yamamoto could obliterate at least some of the Espada with Sōkotsu, that's how strong he is, but also we don't know enough to say that definitively. And again, this is just my conjecture at this point. But it's a good, fun question, I like it a lot, and I hope my 2 cents were somewhat valuable, even though again I think Kubo leaves it purposefully vague where the actual Espada are concerned. But to end this topic, this rather rambly topic, on as definitive an answer as I want to give, I think, yeah, Kubo is basically saying, Espada level Hiero or not, you know, Wonderweiss was still a strong Arrancar, and he was taken out in one hit by Sōkotsu, because that's just how powerful it, and by extension Yamamoto, are. So, good hero or not, it doesn't matter. You know, Yamamoto is that powerful that, yeah, he could probably do this to at least some of the Espada as well. Getting into specifics beyond that, talking about which Espada he could do this to, I think is basically pointless because we have literally no idea. Now, this next one is a little weird to me, and I'm not sure I fully understand it, to be completely honest. So, this question was posed to Kubo, and it reads as follows. Is the reason for why Hado 31 to 33, each containing the character for fire in their name, is because all 30's Hado are part of the same technique system? So the spells they are referring to are Hado 31 Shakaho, Red Fire Cannon, Hado 32 Oka-sen, Yellow Fire Flash, and Hado 33 Sōkatsu, Blue Fire Crash Down, which, yes, are essentially all variations of fire-based attacks or fire-based energy blasts. And it's interesting they should bring this up, because I even mentioned recently in my latest battle analysis that Oka-sen in particular was a spell that people were actively waiting to see revealed back in the day. Because Hado's 31 and 33 were so commonly used, 32 sandwiched between them was a bit of a mystery. And then eventually it was revealed by Kisuke. And you know, I didn't think much of it, other than they were all three fairly similar attacks, and I thought the connection was simply that each one was a different primary colour. That was kind of as far as it went, as far as I thought. You know, Shakaho was famously red, Sōkatsu was famously blue, and then, surprise, surprise, it turns out that Oka-sen was yellow, essentially. But no, there seems to be more to it. Kubo's answer is as follows. The 30's are classified as middle-class 4 elements Hado, which is why they utilise the 4 elements: earth, water, fire, and wind. This seems like a fairly big reveal to me, regarding a magic system that went massively underutilised and underexplored in the series itself. Judging by this answer alone, there's even more to Kidō and the Kidō classifications than we first realised, but I'm also not sure how much sense this really makes. At first I went back to double check the 3 Hado in question to see if maybe I'd missed something, but no, they all seem to just be fire-based. And the problem is, we don't know any other Hado spells in the 30's. These are the only ones we know. It would have made way more sense, in my opinion anyway, for Kubo to just simply say that every level 30's Hado is fire-based. But instead, apparently, they make use of the 4 elements, but as far as I can tell, we never see that. So I guess it's totally possible that Hado 34 through 39, and maybe 30, each reflect these other elements, but we don't currently know that. It's weird to me that they would have an entire classification all to themselves when we simply don't know what the rest even are. Again, this kind of just feels to me like Kubo being led to an answer via the question. That's where this new classification comes from, the fact that the person asking the question brought up the idea that all 30's Hado are part of the same technique system, which, based on what we've always known about Kidō, is, you know, just not a thing. It's also weird that there are other Hado that reflect elemental attacks that are nowhere near the 30's. You know, for example, Hado 58, Tenran, which is clearly wind-based. Or, more overtly, for the purposes of this specific question, Hado 54, Hien, which is literally another flame attack. It's just a bit odd, and it reinforces that we should have seen more from Kidō in general. And I can't help but wonder if this is one of those examples again of Kubo elaborating more where it wasn't really needed. 31, 32, and 33 could have just been a cool trio that kind of link up through arbitrary means. But now we've got an entirely new classification that doesn't seem to line up. But maybe I'm wrong. You know, maybe it will eventually be revealed that Hado's 34 and 35 are water-based, Hado's 36 and 37 are earth-based, and 38 and 39 are wind-based. But also, why? What's the point in that? It all ultimately just stems from the fact that these 3 Hado from the 30s that we actually know all happen to be fire-based, and I kind of thought that was enough of a connection as it was. And the fact that they're represented by the 3 primary colours. Also, is there actually a single Hado that utilizes water? I don't think there is. So yeah, bit of a weird one, and trust me, I'm not against Kidō as a system being expanded upon at all. But it just feels a little hollow when we don't even know what the other 30s level Hado are. We don't know any of them. The only ones we know are fire-based, so it's only one of the elements being covered at all. And last but not least, the final topic for today's video looks at another area of Soul Society lore that was, I don't want to say underexplored in the manga, because that's just not really true. We knew honestly as much about these guys as we ever needed to. But it's always cool to learn a little more, and that's about the Central 46, the judiciary body of the Soul Society. So Kubo was asked the following question: how can one become a part of the Central 46? Can you only become a member if you're of noble status? To which Kubo replied, Central 46 is basically comprised of members of the 46 families that succeed each other. So in other words, yes, you do need to be of noble status. And now that's pretty interesting to close things out today. I don't think we knew previously, I could be wrong, that there were as many as 46 noble families within the Seirete. I mean, that seems like a lot. We've known since pretty much forever that there are a lot of lower noble houses. Kyoraku and Ukitake, for example, both belong to lower noble houses. Lower here just simply meaning those that aren't a part of the 5 biggest ones. Which, by the way, I'm kind of assuming are not among the 46. I don't know, maybe they are, which would mean that each of them except for Shiba presumably has a member on the council, which I guess makes sense, but the reason I don't know if these 5 biggest families are included in the 46 or not is because it's always kind of seemed to me like the 46 are on a mostly even field. I mean, maybe they're not. Again, we don't really know anything about these guys that's not really surface level, and that's not revealed either way. Whether there is a hierarchy among the Central 46 or not, it's never actually explained. Regardless, it does reinforce the stigma that life within the Soul Society, and yes, even within the Seirete, is extremely unfair. Those who govern the Soul Society are all from the nobility. They likely don't know what real life is like. Certainly not for the Rukongai, and probably not for the majority of Shinigami either, which is fascinating to me and maybe even makes a lot of sense. Alright everyone, but that's it for today's video and the latest in our Klub Outside Q&A Roundup series. As always, I do hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you took something of value away from this video as well. Let me know down in the comments which of the topics did you find the most interesting. How do you feel about the motifs behind Aizen's Hōgyoku transformations? How do you feel about the, I guess, revelation that Wonderweiss supposedly has lower Hiero than any of the Espada? It kind of makes sense to me, and doesn't really change how I feel about either of the characters involved in that scenario, Yamamoto or Wonderweiss. I'd love to get your thoughts on that down below. Let me know your thoughts on the Elemental Kidō, the level 30s Hado, and the lore regarding the Central 46. I'd love to get all of your thoughts down in the comments below. Alright everyone, once again, thank you so very much for watching. Again, consider hitting subscribe if you enjoyed this video today and you want to support this kind of work. It does make a huge difference. Check out my other channel, Mr. Tomo Talks Games as well. Try and help us reach 15,000 subs by the end of the year. I'd massively appreciate it. And finally, a huge everlasting shout out and a massive thank you goes out to my wonderful supporters over on Patreon, without whom I wouldn't be able to keep doing this, and your support does mean the world of difference each and every month. And I do genuinely appreciate it so much. So a massive thank you to all of you over there as well. Again, I'm just very, very grateful. Alright guys, until next time, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.